In the gaslit shadows of 1830s New York, where moral boundaries blurred as easily as candlelight in fog, a single night would expose secrets that powerful men would kill to protect. What began as the brutal murder of a beautiful courtesan would unravel into something far more sinister, a web of corruption, cover-ups, and evidence that defied explanation. The case files remain sealed to this day. But first, don't miss out. Subscribe for regular doses of the unexplained. It was April 10th, 1836, just before dawn broke over Thomas Street in New York City's notorious Five Points district. The narrow cobblestone lane reeked of coal smoke and human desperation, lined with boarding houses that asked no questions of their clientele. Number 41 stood among these establishments, a three-story brick building where Rosina Townsend operated what polite society refused to acknowledge, a house of assignation for the city's elite. The fire had been deliberately set. Rosina discovered the blaze in the rear bedroom just after 5 in the morning, flames consuming silk curtains and expensive furniture with suspicious intensity. But the fire itself would prove to be the least disturbing aspect of what investigators found that morning. In the center of the charred room lay the body of Helen Jewett, 23 years old, one of the most sought-after courtesans in the city. The young woman had been struck 3 times in the head with a hatchet before the flames were set to consume the evidence. Her face, mercifully turned away from the fire's path, remained untouched, beautiful even in death, with dark hair found across blood-soaked pillows. Detective Captain William Wiley arrived at the scene within the hour, accompanied by Coroner Archer. What they documented in their initial report would later be heavily redacted, though fragments of the original testimony survived in private correspondence discovered decades later. The victim's room showed signs of a struggle far more violent than 3 hatchet blows could explain. Furniture had been overturned with such force that deep gouges scarred the wooden floor. The bedroom door, solid oak reinforced with iron hinges, had been torn completely from its frame. Helen Jewett had not been an ordinary prostitute. Born Dorcas Doyon in Temple, Maine, she possessed an education that rivaled most gentlemen of the era. She spoke French fluently, quoted classical literature, and maintained extensive correspondence with clients who included judges, bankers, and politicians. More significantly, she kept detailed records of these relationships, records that had vanished from her room by the time investigators arrived. The primary suspect emerged quickly. Richard Robinson, 19 years old, worked as a clerk at a prestigious mercantile firm on Pearl Street. Multiple witnesses placed him at the brothel that evening, and he had been seen leaving through the rear garden shortly before the fire began. Physical evidence seemed overwhelming. A blue cloak bearing his initials was found abandoned in the backyard, and the murder weapon, a hatchet stolen from a nearby grocery, bore his fingerprints. Yet Robinson's arrest revealed the first of many contradictions that would plague the investigation. The young man possessed an alibi that should have been impossible to fabricate. 3 separate witnesses, including a night watchman and 2 merchants, swore they had seen Robinson at different locations across the city during the estimated time of the murder. The distances between these sightings would have required superhuman speed to traverse on foot. More disturbing was the testimony of Sarah Dunscombe, another resident of Rosina's establishment. Sarah claimed to have heard Helen's final conversation through the thin walls that separated their rooms. According to her statement, Helen had been speaking with someone she addressed as Judge, a man who spoke in cultured tones about the arrangement and maintaining discretion. But Sarah also insisted she heard a second voice, younger and more agitated, belonging to someone Helen called Richard. The impossibility was this: both voices had spoken simultaneously, carrying on separate conversations with Helen, as if neither man was aware of the other's presence. Coroner Archer's examination of the body revealed additional anomalies that never appeared in official reports. Helen's injuries, while fatal, showed a peculiar characteristic. The hatchet wounds displayed two distinct patterns. The first set appeared to be made by a left-handed attacker, while the second set clearly came from someone right-handed. Richard Robinson was definitively right-handed, confirmed by writing samples and witness observations. The investigation took a darker turn when Captain Wiley interviewed Helen's regular clients. Several prominent men admitted to receiving strange communications in the weeks before her death. Judge Ogden Edwards reported finding unsigned notes slipped under his office door, warning him to discontinue certain associations or face exposure of past indiscretions. Banker James Gordon Bennett described similar messages, but his contained specific details about private conversations he had shared with Helen, details that no outside observer could have known. Most unsettling was the testimony of Dr. David Rogers, who had served as Helen's physician. During her final visit to his practice, just 3 days before the murder, Helen had appeared in a state of extreme agitation. She spoke of being followed by watchers who seemed to know her movements before she made them. Dr. Rogers noted that she displayed symptoms consistent with severe paranoia, yet her fears proved remarkably specific and accurate. Helen had told the doctor that someone was reading her private correspondence before she received it. To test this claim, Dr. Rogers arranged for a colleague to send Helen a sealed letter containing information known only to the sender. When Helen opened the letter in the doctor's presence, she found it contained different content entirely, a warning written in her own handwriting, though she swore she had never seen the message before. The trial of Richard Robinson became a sensation that gripped New York society. Defense attorney William Price presented evidence that should have secured an acquittal, yet the proceedings themselves defied logical explanation. Witnesses gave contradictory testimony that changed between morning and afternoon sessions. Court stenographers reported that their notes from previous days had been mysteriously altered overnight, with entire pages rewritten in handwriting that matched their own. Most bizarre was the behavior of the physical evidence. The murder weapon disappeared from the courthouse evidence room, only to reappear in the same location 3 days later. When examined by weapons expert Thomas Mitchell, the hatchet bore different markings than those documented in the initial police report. The tool now showed signs of having been used in multiple violent acts, with bloodstains that chemical analysis dated to different time periods spanning several months. Robinson himself seemed to exist in a state of confused detachment throughout the trial. He maintained his innocence with convincing sincerity, yet he also demonstrated knowledge of crime scene details that had never been made public. When questioned about Helen's final words, he accurately quoted her dying statement to investigators, information that had been sealed in classified documents. The prosecution's case unraveled when key witnesses began recanting their testimony. Rosina Townsend, the brothel keeper, suddenly claimed she had been mistaken about the timeline of events. The night watchman who had placed Robinson at the scene admitted his identification had been uncertain. Most significantly, Sarah Dunscombe disappeared entirely, leaving behind only a note stating she had been advised to relocate for health reasons. On June 8, 1836, the jury delivered a verdict of not guilty after deliberating for just 40 minutes. Richard Robinson walked free, but the celebration proved premature. Within 6 months, 3 of the jurors had died under mysterious circumstances. 2 succumbed to sudden illnesses that baffled their physicians, while the third was found dead in his home with no apparent cause. The case files reveal one final mystery that investigators never resolved. In the weeks following the trial, several witnesses reported seeing Helen Jewett alive in various locations throughout the city. These sightings were dismissed as hysteria or mistaken identity, yet they shared consistent details. The woman appeared exactly as Helen had in life, wearing the same distinctive emerald dress she had been found in, but she seemed unaware of attempts to approach or speak with her. Dr. David Rogers, Helen's former physician, documented the most credible of these encounters. While walking past the ruins of the Thomas Street brothel, which had been demolished after the fire, he observed a female figure standing in what had been Helen's room. The woman stood motionless for several minutes before turning toward the street. Dr. Rogers swore under oath that he recognized Helen's face clearly, though she appeared to look through him as if he were invisible. The investigation was officially closed in December 1836, but private correspondence between city officials suggests the case remained active in secret channels for years afterward. Police Captain Wiley's personal journal, discovered after his death in 1842, contained entries describing ongoing surveillance of individuals connected to the case. His final entry, dated just days before his own mysterious demise, consisted of a single, repeated phrase: "The arrangement continues." God help us all. What do you think happened in that room on Thomas Street? Was Helen Jewett the victim of a single killer or something far more sinister? Subscribe to explore more cases where the official story hides truths too dangerous to reveal.